Hi guys, just a quick video about how I got on at Suffolk Warhost Weekend Singles on the first day. It was a GBHL 90, it was a 600 point good versus evil format. So what that means is that at the start of each scenario both players roll off and the good player is the one who rolled the highest. And then the scenarios were determined by vetoing scenarios from a pool with the TO vetoing a scenario for everyone, and then players chose between the other three, with the good player vetoing first and then the evil player vetoing second, and then obviously the last scenario was played. So a few of the guys from my Middle-earth circle, where I am, have been to some of these events before, run by James Palmer. I think he runs quite a lot out there, but I've never really been able to make it. Just because obviously I've slowed down with the tournaments and stuff, and it's in Woolpit, so it's a couple of hours from me, so it's not too bad. But obviously, yeah, just a bit of extra effort to get there, I suppose. But I was quite keen on this. Firstly, because I've obviously positive feedback from my friends on previous events, and I just quite like the idea of a weekend away for sort of a 2-dayer, but fresh tournament on each day. I've sort of gone off 2 days, sort of one tournament stretched over 2 days, to be honest. So yes, very keen for this. So in terms of army selection, I didn't think too hard about the good army. I went with my Eagles, and that's just because I painted them up last year, and I've not actually used them at all yet, because I sort of feel a bit obnoxious bringing them to a friendly game, since I know they're quite meta at the moment. But since it's GBHL 90, I think people probably can't begrudge me bringing them. But also, it means I actually get to use them, because I basically painted them and then put them back in a display case, which is always a little sad. You kind of want to get them out and use them a bit. So I thought, you know what, Eagles, perfect. So obviously the list is, I think there's probably only one way to build it, which is Guahir, 2 fledglings, and 3 great eagles. And I mean, there's lots of videos out there about that sort of more meta-y things and stuff, but obviously it's just it's quite a powerful list. Sort of high mobility, hits very hard. You got a lot of monster shenanigans, which are a bit stronger this edition. So you got lots of hurl, barging, and whatnot options. You got the piercing cry, recently FAQ'd, so that it's sort of where Guahir ends up. But so I guess he sort of he does a screech and nobody within 6 can charge. That used to be can't move, but now it's can't charge. But Guahir sort of drags that bubble with him, I think. So yeah, I thought with that FAQ as well, it's a bit less obnoxious, because I mean realistically I'm probably not going to win the whole thing. So just bringing something that's solid, but yeah, not sort of too bad. Turning to evil, I sort of started off with. So I've not really played much this edition. I thought about getting my usurpers out again, but I was like, well, I've only been to one tournament recently. I can't remember when it was, to be honest, but fairly recently, and I brought usurpers. I got so much stuff. It's just sort of nice to do something different every tournament, so that I don't get too good at anything. But I thought about Army of the White Hand, just because it seems sort of fairly idiot-proof and fairly easy to build. I don't know, something that I found something slightly off-putting about the sort of army special rules, the lightning and stuff, because it just seems like it's not super friendly, and obviously it's a 90, but I was like, eh. So I've sort of pivoted to Kirathungul just because of the new Shelob, and obviously I took Kirathungul I think a couple of times last edition, but obviously I used it with my doubles partner Tom Rice when we went to Throne of Skulls. We ran it as a doubles quite successfully, so I was like, you know what, let's do that. So obviously 600 points I can get a captain as well, so I did a battle report not long ago where I got shot off the table, but it's probably because I had no march, as well as some sort of pretty hot dice, frankly. But yeah, I thought, well, I'd get the spider, the 2 heroes and a captain, so I could be marching about and stuff, and quite a high model count, and I think it's pretty good. I don't think it's like top tier, but it seems pretty good. And I just painted up Shelob, so I thought, yes, let's do that. So in terms of the list, yeah, so 600 points. I obviously had Shagrat, who has to be my general, I think, and I got obviously 15 Mordor Urks, so just fleshing out his warband as much as I could. 9 of them have two-handed weapons. That's more just because of how the points fell, because I ordered a few and then I was there with a few extra points, so I was just like, well, give a bunch from two-handed weapons, and it gives me options, because obviously with the animosity, it's potentially going up to +2 if I do two-hand, and, you know, for example, if I were to come against Eagles or something, then I could chuck a bunch of Orcs and Urks into it, and then, you know, get a few of them to two-hand, so that's kind of the logic, I guess. Gorbag was bringing 8 Mordor Orcs with Spear, 1 with Banner, 2 with Bow, and then we've got a Mordor Captain leading 6 Warriors with Shield, 6 with Spear, 3 with Shield, and then 2 with Bow. I think possibly actually I should have probably reduced it to 3 Mordor Urks with two-handed weapons, and then put an extra Orc in there, but I don't think it made a huge difference. Obviously Shelob was in there as well. Can't forget about Shelob. So that's 41 models. Yes, I was quite happy with how I built it, to be honest, because obviously loads of the Orcs have spears, and that's just so I can shield wall up behind the Urks. And then as sort of, you know, fighting sort of dissolves from shield wall into sort of loose melee, that's when, you know, I can then pop forward with the Orcs, get the animosity going, and that's kind of the logic. But often you sort of need the shield wall to break it down in the first place to sort of get to that point. I chucked a few shields in there just because I know the Mordor Urks tend to get shot off the board quite a lot, so I just needed some Orcs to take their place almost in the shield wall. And the bows kind of do that in a pinch, because if I'm not really shooting, if I'm just sort of bubbling up and marching, I thought, you know, I'd just chuck the Mordor Orc archers in the front line or whatever, or they can hang back and either, you know, take pot shots at stuff or just sit on objectives. So that's the logic. So with that, let's get into game 1. So game 1, I was against Barad-dûr, which was Sauron and a Orc captain, with basically a whole bunch of Orcs, a few Black Numenorians, and then 2 Wild Riders. So quite a straightforward list, but obviously quite a nasty list in a way, because obviously you've got Sauron. But luckily we were given pool 1. I honestly can't remember who vetoed what, but I had to veto first. So I think it might have been Breakthrough wasn't being played, if memory serves. Then I think I vetoed Capture and Control, just because I didn't want the objectives sort of too close together, given I was relying on my mobility a lot. So I basically didn't want Sauron camping in the middle of the board and then sort of be able to influence a whole bunch of stuff. So I thought Domination might be quite good, because I can sort of spread the objectives out a bit. So I believe my opponent Connor won the roll-off to determine sort of table edge and then deploy a warband. I think he set one right at the back, which then sort of gave me the confidence to basically just stick it more or less on the middle line. I was wondering whether I sort of kite around, try and get him to split up to sort of run for different objectives and pick him off, but firstly I didn't think he'd sort of fall for that, and secondly Sauron could just sit back and chill soul me, and sort of just, you know, it's quite a long game, so especially given my low model count, so I think I was going to get chill souled a lot. It probably wasn't going to work, so I thought I'll just deploy sort of aggressively, because I think, yeah, with Sauron at the back of the board, I wasn't sort of, I didn't have to worry about being charged turn 1 basically. So he then obviously deployed his second warband next to Sauron as well. So that's sort of how we ended up, me on the middle line, and then Connor towards the back of his board edge, with Sauron sort of out the front of a bunch of Orcs who had castled. Obviously the strategy was Sauron does all the work and the Orcs and Black Nuns try and die quite slowly, which made sense to me. He had a couple of objectives next to his battle line, and obviously the middle objective, and then I put two on my side as well. So pretty sort of evenly spaced like that. So I basically just sort of started to move forwards as he'd started to move forwards as well, but, you know, just making sure I'm out of charge range and stuff. And he did it quite well in that he then sort of, you know, he was chilling soul and stuff all the time, but then he sort of ran his Orcs backwards a bit. I got a bit well, not a bit unlucky. I mean, it was a good move. Sauron sort of in the middle, Gwar here, within 12 inches of him, which I now realise was unwise because obviously I've copped to compel, and I spent. I think I spent 2 will on it because I was like, if I fail, then basically Sauron's just going to bonk him on the head, and then that'll be GG. So I spent 2 will. That's because Sauron did a heroic channel, so counted as having rolled a 6. I rolled a 4 high, I spent 2 might. So already I was sort of on the back foot a bit because I obviously spent the might and the will to avoid the compel, but I thought it'd be all worth it because the following turn I'd just sort of get stuck in. But I sort of never really won a roll off that was particularly helpful here. So he sort of moved his orcs backwards again, and then we sort of had another turn of sort of caginess. So it was a few turns before I properly got in to his battle line because I was trying to sort of manoeuvre around, and I sort of swapped Gwar here to being on my right, away from Sauron. And I basically tried to fly past Sauron and sort of dump on all the orcs. But obviously Connor was playing it very well in terms of sort of castling up at the back and just dying slowly and stuff. And I thought I'd sort of get in and just do lots of barges and hurling and stuff. And I think I tried a barge, with 1 eagle, and then it didn't really come off. And another eagle sort of bounced off. And Gwar here did do some cleaning up, which was good. But I was sort of a fledgling down because I sent a fledgling back to sort of chase down his warg riders, trying to claim the objectives on my side of the board. And to be fair to him, he did kill 1 warg rider, but then I'd lost so many eagles that I sort of ended up calling him back quite late in the game. So there was sort of a warg rider sort of unmolested in my table half, which is a bit upsetting. But yeah, in terms of the combats, Sauron was more or less killing an eagle a turn once I was sort of in range and stuff. And there was a couple of moments where I could sort of get into his captain and stuff, but I just sort of, it never really sort of came off for me. And then I think after that 1 turn, he then sort of, put in a very good anti-fly formation, so obviously I could hurl into the captain, but I wasn't going to kill him like that. And once he spent the 2 might for a couple of moves, because Gwar was sort of out by this point, because I think he'd started to tangle with Sauron, and Sauron sort of sauntered back that way. I was just sort of losing eagles, getting surrounded and killed and stuff. And a lot of his army wasn't actually really engaged either, because he was just trying not to lose too many models while Sauron won the game. And that's pretty much what happened, to be honest. I actually can't remember all the ins and outs of the rolls, which is sort of part of the problem of doing 2 tournaments back to back, is that I can't remember specifically all the rolls and stuff. I think I got a bit unlucky with the rolls in terms of not winning combats and stuff, and Sauron never really fluffed the whole game. But equally, I didn't play it amazingly. I think in terms of the overall strategy, it possibly had to sort of be more or less how I played it in order to get to grips with them. I think Connor played it very well, and I think my actual execution wasn't always amazing. So I think, probably kind of the result that was deserved, which is a 14-0 loss to start with. So it wasn't great in terms of, well, no, it was great. It was a good game. I enjoyed it. Wasn't great in terms of my standing in the tournament. Right, so game 2, the rolls ended up that I was playing evil this time, so I got my Cirith Ungol out against my opponent Jason's Riv Knights. So his Rivendell Knights were Elrond and Arwen, leading 16, is it? Rivendell Knights, including a banner. So quite scary. Pool 6 was chosen, with the tier veto being Fog of War. I believe I vetoed Convergence just because any deployment where I'm split up is going to be fairly fatal, I think, in terms of the Rivendell Knights just ganging up on one lot and then murdering them and then going and killing the other lot. Clash by Moonlight could have been quite scary in terms of the bows, but at least they're quite short range, so I sort of get to 13 inches away and then march, so I only cop 1 turn of shooting at +1. So I guess that's probably why Jason vetoed it. So he ended up playing Lee from the front, which I didn't hate because I had 4 heroes against his 2, but what was alarming was the 12-inch deployment. So I basically just deployed in a march bubble, and Jason deployed sort of more into his into his deployment zone. I basically set up a march bubble. Forgot to march the first turn, but remembered the second turn, so that was good. And basically, it was quite. I didn't sort of optimise my sort of push forwards a couple of times because I had to set myself up in a way where if he decided to charge, I'd sort of receive it and not be in a horrible position. But Jason kept kiting for the first few turns, which I suppose you have to do with Rivendell Knights, to be honest, because if you're not picking off a bunch of stuff before the combat starts, then you can end up in a spot of bother. I suppose I was sort of slightly happy in that if he was going to charge me earlier, a couple of times I hadn't set up amazingly, and I think most of my infantry was okay, but Shelob was just sort of nowhere. But by the time we did engage, it was not so bad, and I was sort of right in his face. And obviously, he did it in such a way, just with how priorities fell and stuff, that he would definitely get one charge, which obviously happened, which was good, and obviously you have to do that. But I'd not set up terribly, and he was sort of boxed in between two woods, and obviously there was ways for him to sort of run around it and get objectives that way, but it wasn't a horrible position to be in, I think, with sort of the objectives, like 14 inches behind me probably. So yeah, and I put Shelob on my left. On the photo up here, she's off screen to the left. You can see an Uruk and a dice. She's literally just off camera there. And unfortunately, I forgot to take photos of the actual sort of fighting. But basically, I copped a turn being charged. I think one thing that at the time I thought was a mistake, but then with our sort of team debrief afterwards, actually it's probably made sense. Was I was worried that I'd accidentally left the combat open for Elrond, where he could charge the Uruk on my far left and then combat into Shelob and then sort of potentially juice Shelob, but actually maybe it wasn't a bad idea to not do that, because Shelob is possibly one of the main things capable of just tar-pitting Elrond if Elrond doesn't, deal with it sort of immediately, or dice are a bit iffy or what have you, and he's, that then sort of leaves me control of the middle. So yeah, so that sort of so Elrond sort of went to the middle basically, and a few Riv Knights bounced off and died, but overall a pretty good charge. Arwen cast Wrath of Bruin, and as did Elrond, I think actually. Don't think, didn't really cause too much damage, but knocked everyone on their bums, so that's obviously quite handy. He did it in such a way where my heroes would be out of 3, so couldn't resist, so obviously did that sort of, very well. I'd left a couple of channels for my heroes to get through, so yeah, following turn they sort of did that, and Shelob got in as well, and there was some sort of barging and all the rest of it, and without sort of doing a blow by blow account of things, I think Arwen killed a few guys, but then ended up copping a few wounds, so she ended up with 1 wound, no fate, I think, at the end of the game. So I couldn't quite polish her off, but she was sort of wedged against some woodlands by the boys, and Shagrat sort of combated through a bunch of stuff and tried to sort of keep him away from Elrond, or at least hold on to a mite for a strike or something. Gorbag was mostly just sort of, I think I struck one turn just to make sure I was higher than the Rivendell Knight and kill it, because I just thought he'd exchange a mite for a Rivendell Knight, I think. And I think Jason's luck sort of ran out a bit in that I sort of started to clean up Rivendell Knights, and to be fair, he did break me, but I didn't really mention, to be fair, but obviously as I was moving up I was copping shooting, and I think I must have lost like 10 or 12 to shooting. So then sort of killing sort of another 10 in combat's not sort of too crazy, bearing in mind it's charging knights and stuff. So I think I did okay in the combats. But yeah, I managed to break him, and in the end I managed to quarter him, and that's what ended the game. And it ended 3-1 simply because I Yeah, simply because we both broke each other. I killed his banner, so he had no banners left at the end of the game. I did try and float a captain back to the middle to grab at least one objective, and obviously Shelob could then potentially start, running back to one as well. But I just sort of went from having broken him to quartering him quite quickly, just because obviously the army's so small, and with Shelob, charging to Rivendell Knights and killing both a couple of times, I think, and Shagrat doing their Lord's work, it sort of all happened a bit quickly. But so it was actually quite a narrow win, simply because we didn't really do the objectives that much. But it's a win's a win, so that's good. It was an enjoyable game actually. I think Jason did it quite well as well, in that he kited at the start of the game. But then, once he reached the back of the board, he then did get involved rather than just continuing to kite. So it was still like, he kind of struck that balance between sort of playing the army the way it sort of needed to be played, but then also not just kiting the whole game and making me lose the will to live. So I did appreciate that as well. But it was a good game. I think I played it quite well. I played it a lot better than I did in the first one, so I don't really think I made any mistakes apart from there was a couple of sort of placement things which I didn't do very well. But that before I got right to his end of the board. So if he charged me turn 1 or 2, I probably wasn't set up amazingly, but luckily, by the time I actually did engage, I was very happy with how I had everything set up. Just obviously with shield wall and then Shagrat and Gorbag behind the line, but with little holes to run in, and then Shelob on the left just to sort of charge in and start carving up and sort of rolling up the line a bit, and that's more or less how it played out. I didn't touch Elrond, so that I didn't get any points there, but it was a good game actually, and so that puts me on 1 win, 1 loss, but I imagine my VP difference is not looking super healthy. But with that, into game 3. Okay, so next scenario was the killing scenarios, but to the death was vetoed by the TO. It was slightly, well, it was probably more than slightly unfortunate that I think the game was determined by the first dice roll, because my opponent, Chris Ryder, had brought Army of Gothmog, which had Gothmog, Goroth, Guritz, a troll, and then just Morannons. I think was it the Battle of I can't remember if it was No, it wasn't Defenders of Pelennor. It was Return of the King, with Aragorn, Leggy, King of the Dead, and about 12 or 13 Warriors of the Dead, including a banner. So obviously I was basically worried that if he played good, Lords of Battle or Contest of Champions or Assassination, I didn't see myself doing well in any of those unless I sort of get quite lucky with Shelob and various other things. But then Eagles against Gothmog, you'd probably back the Eagles quite substantially in any of those as well. So basically I'm pretty sure it was determined by who played good, which ended up being me. So it was my Eagles against Army of Gothmog. And I had to veto first, so I vetoed Assassination, because I think basically all those scenarios favour me, but Assassination favours me the least, is probably the way to put it. And then he vetoed Lords of Battle, so he ends up playing Contest of Champions. Obviously Gwahir had to be my champion, and his champion was Goroth, which obviously makes sense because he's got Strike, Burley, Khmer, Maggot, all those things sort of playing into him being a fairly decent champion. And basically, he had to deploy first. He had Goroth and 4 friends on the middle line. I deployed Gwahir, obviously within 3, but then all his friends were basically out of charge range of any of the orcs, so I sort of deployed them slightly further back. So basically, if you wanted to try and bum rush Gwahir, then I'd just be able to counter-charge, is the theory. So he won the first priority, obviously indicating that he's probably going to run Goroth back to Gothmog and run Gothmog up, which obviously makes sense. I thought about doing a heroic move, but I think that I would have got Gwahir into Goroth, but all the other Eagles would have been I think they've been quite vulnerable to being charged by Gothmog and Guritz's warbands. I forgot to say that their warbands had to deploy in the back 12 inches, so Goroth was literally on his own. So the game could have potentially ended there if I'd done the move off, won the strike off, and then killed Goroth outright. But the problem is he had a strike, and I was going to get sandwiched and potentially not be able to charge. Not be able to charge again if I lost the subsequent move off or ran out of might because I had to use it in combats and stuff. And he had obviously potentially up to 4 come here magnet rolls and then his fate and stuff. So I thought it was a bit death or glory, and it might work and end the game there and then, but ultimately it was just a bit pointless, I think, to do that when I didn't actually need to do that to win. So I let him run his Goroth backwards, and I basically set up for the following turn, which was putting all of my eagles just out of 6. There's sort of a ruin that separated us, and there was like a little channel where he was going to obviously push all his infantry and troll through and stuff. And I set up all my eagles sort of 6.5 inches away from his orcs there, and Guahir and a fledgling basically went round to the left. And then the following turn, I think I lost priority again. So obviously he's sort of set up, and I charged in with everything. So I just charged in with as much stuff as I could. If I couldn't charge in, I sort of left it out of charge range in case I lost an eagle. But I think the key thing is Guahir charged 2 and then combated into Guritz and killed him, because Guritz was kind of at the back, because obviously there's no way Chris is going to be able to protect everything, so I think he's sort of protecting Gothmog and Goroth next to the big troll, and then Guritz is kind of left on his own, so I combated into him and killed him, so that gave me my might back and put me on 3 kills. Obviously Goroth and Gothmog weren't in combat that turn because I'd had the priority. Yes, in terms of Guahir, I'm going to have to apologise because I didn't really take any photos, because it was quite a quick game actually, and I kind of, I think it was all done in sort of 45 minutes maybe. So Guahir sort of carried on cleaning up warriors at the back, and everyone else sort of just charging in. And I think the main story is that the troll killed, he ended up killing 3 eagles over the course of the game, because he was able to get in and trap eagles and stuff, because obviously if I had priority I had to charge in, but I wasn't going to be able to mitigate against all the traps and stuff. So the troll sort of, not every turn, but he tried to bonk an eagle a turn, fairly successfully to be honest. So that was pretty scary, but ultimately I was sort of just churning through all the orcs, and then I think he started to use Gothmog a bit more aggressively just to try and take down some eagles and stuff, and same with Goroth. Goroth, having to get stuck in because that's ultimately he has to, because that's the game. He has to try and take eagles off, and Goroth didn't really. I think he won a combat against one but didn't do any damage, and then Gothmog didn't really do too much either. I think a couple of turns of combat with Gothmog, especially. I think there was a turn when I managed to charge him with 2, and I think that sort of saw Gothmog off. And I think in the last turn, I think I managed to get Guahir into Goroth, but I don't think I killed him actually, so I might have even lost the combat and got pushed back. But so Goroth ended the game alive, but I'd sort of quartered him this turn. I think that was the turn Gothmog died as well. So I think it was 18-0, and I think the points I dropped were that my champion didn't kill his champion. But yeah, there's not too much to say with this one. It basically sort of went as expected. I think it was sort of just determined by the first roll, to be honest. I think as soon as you had Eagles, Army of Gothmog, Contest of Champions, it's just you're gonna struggle. Because obviously Goroth only gets a point per model he kills, and each one of those models is a massive eagle, and I can just, even if Goroth kills an eagle, as long as I kill 3 orcs, I think that makes it impossible to lose at that point if my maths checks out. Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward game, to be honest. Okay, so final game. I was against Josh Sherman and I rolled lower, so I was getting my Kirathungal out for the last time. and he had ranges of Mirkwood with Legolas, Tariel, and Thorin, and then about 20 rangers, I think. So it was pool 4. TO veto was retrieval. Josh then vetoed seize the prizes, and I vetoed treasure hoard. I think he vetoed seize the prizes simply because he'd probably have to get quite heavily involved in the middle of the board in order to sort of stand a chance, and that means not leveraging the bows so much. I vetoed treasure hoard. I think destroyer supplies and treasure hoard are pretty similar in terms of my chances. I sort of preferred destroyer supplies just because I think it sort of forces him to get involved with me in order to destroy my supplies. So although the deployment's still not amazing because it's 12 inches on, in theory I could sort of march up, get in his face, and then he's got a long walk to go and get my objectives, whereas I've got a bit more mobility with the march sort of number of models I have and Shelob. So that was the logic. So in terms of deployment, I deployed Shelob first. I just put her sort of on my far left. I was hoping to sort of figure out where he was going to put his guys. 'Cause unfortunately, I'm on the roll off. Although it means I could pick the board edge where the woods would be slightly less irritating to deal with. Yeah, didn't work though because he had Thorin as a one warband drop, so then I sort of had to commit. So I deployed all my dudes on the right of this wood and sort of set them up basically in a massive march ball. But I put a few guys. I think I put my bows and then a few Uruks sort of milling around at the back outside of march range of the captain. And Shelob was on sort of the left side of this wood. We agreed that Shelob could go through the woods without penalty because of her rule. Can't remember what it's called now, but she just ignores difficult terrain apart from water. But probably couldn't finish in there just because of like the her base wouldn't fit. But we sort of agreed that she could sort of scuttle through anyway. So so that was good. So we pre-agreed that, which was definitely worth doing. And then he sort of deployed in a line pretty much from sort of his centre point to more or less where his supplies were on his right. And first few turns went pretty much as expected. For anyone who saw my battle report where I played against Rangers of Ithilien with my Kirithungul, it went down in a pretty similar way in that I marched twice. To be fair, I left my hero out the front, and so I was thinking, I don't know. I was sort of wondering if you might shoot my captain instead, and since he needs 6s to wound, it might actually sort of be a bit more of a sponge, even though I sort of lose one of my heroes. But he prioritised all the Uruks, and I think by the time I reached him, I think I'd lost about 15, and I broke at 21. So So I sort of marched up and sort of moved sort of further left because there was this big bunch of trees right in the middle, which was a bit annoying. And I sort of swapped Shelob from my left to my right, and I sort of figured, well, I'll send my army left of these woods, and Shelob will sort of cause trouble on the right and sort of threaten their objectives whilst also intercepting with sort of using her speed. Appreciate it's kind of mitigated my advantage of numbers somewhat by basically just deathballing, but I think I had to just to get the marches off really. But yeah, it meant by the time I reached him, I was relying on the orcs a lot, not really getting the animosity, all that sort of stuff. But to be fair to Josh, he did shoot me a lot, but he also sort of edged forwards each turn. So obviously part strategy, but also so that was nice. So obviously I just wasn't being kited the whole game, which is always frustrating. Although the way the victory points worked, he actually sort of was chasing his tail a bit because banners. I think they a 4-point swing. So if he broke me and ended quickly quartered me, then I'd win as long as I held onto my banner. So it sort of did actually put the pressure on him to come and sort of engage. So anyway, on that sort of left side. He then sort of pushed into combat. I was able to do fairly well actually because he didn't really manage to sort of get the knife fighter rule going very often, just because firstly my numbers were down, and secondly, although my Mordor Uruks were dead, I still had a whole bunch of spears, and obviously spears are what you want against Mirkwood Elves, because obviously it's about leveraging attacks without triggering knife fighters. So yeah, Gorbag and Shagrat sort of starting to get involved at this point, but I'm trying to avoid Thorin with my heroes anyway, and just sort of clog him up with just chaff. Same with Legolas really. So that sort of develops in sort of me killing quite a few rangers, to be fair. He sends sort of 3 of his rangers sort of round tents and stuff on his right to go and threaten my supplies, and I've got a few guys to intercept, but I very quickly broke, which not ideal when I have sort of orcs and uruks outside of standfast range. But yeah, in terms of sort of the main fight, I was able to clear up a lot of the Mirkwood Elves, so that actually by the end of the game I think I probably had more orcs in the middle than there were rangers, and yeah, Shagrat sort of ended up into Thorin once and survived because I think Thorin won the fight, but then I think he only caused 1 wound to Chris, which I saved cause obviously before it became D3 wounds, which was bad. But then I managed to win a priority because we all very quickly ran out of might with sort of moves. Although I was sort of saving a strike with Shagrat and Gorbag for Legolas and Thorin respectively. Cause when I won prior, I was able to sort of move Shagrat away from Thorin and clog him up with the other one, Gorbag, and then move Shagrat towards Leggy. I think it took me two turns to kill Leggy, just because I think obviously he's 2 wounds, and I'm wounding him on 4s. Although I think it was 3 because I managed to get an orc in there as well. But he managed to save a lot with Fate. So took a couple of turns, but it did get Leggy down. And then it ended up with almost no rangers in the middle. I think the sort of final turn, Thorin went into Shagrat, but I sort of somehow survived that. But I managed to sort of trickle enough orcs through and sort of do all the standfast and stuff. And Gorbag held up Thorin when I sort of was able to move Shagrat off into Leggy. Gorbag was sort of a speed bump for a couple of turns, and also was able, sort of delivered the standfast well enough for my orcs to go back and take sort of his objectives on my left and the centre, which is pretty cool. But I think part of that was a clutch priority, to be completely honest. But then in terms of my supplies, obviously the guys he'd sort of sent round my left pretty much just shot what was in the way, and sort of had just a clear run to my left objective, and then the same guy moved to the middle objective in the last turn. But in terms of what was going on the right, it was quite interesting because basically I moved Shelob up there and she was meant to be doing all the work. And you'll probably notice I haven't mentioned Tariel yet, but that's because Tariel was busy charging into Shelob, who it turns out is a massive spider, and the the Rangers have hatred spider. So I was slightly nervous about that. So I left Shelob in potentially not a great position in that when I lost priority, Tariel 2 elves charged. I don't think they quite trapped actually, so I think that was quite fortunate in that I was sort of just far away enough to not be trapped. But Tariel struck up and did 4 wounds, which I passed all but one of the survival instincts on, but I used a point of will. So at that point I'm two wounds left, but 5 will. So realistically, Shelob's probably not dying. Not running away. She's just dying. But the following turn, I believe Tariel struck again, but just totally whiffed, and I got the 6. And I think that was the turn I managed to get a charge off. And basically, I just killed Tariel and one of the other rangers, and that totally changed the game because there was only one other ranger near me, and there was a couple sort of trickling back to my back right. And essentially, what then happened was that I lost my back right because I only had one Uruk on there, and he had two rangers, so he was able to charge my Uruk to pin him down, and then to get the other one to stand on the objective. So at that point with Shelob, I kind of had the choice to come back and cover the middle objective. Because obviously, like I said earlier, there was a guy coming round sort of my left and sort of just waltzing from having destroyed my left objective to my middle. I could have intercepted with Shelob, but instead I sort of pushed Shelob onto his back right objective, and basically what that meant was that we had we both destroyed all of each other's supplies. And he did have a pop at Shelob with bows, but nothing materialised in the end. And that's broadly how it ended up. So Shagrat had killed Leggy. I'd broken him as well. Yeah, actually I definitely had. Yeah, I'd broken him. He'd broken me, and I think I quartered him, which triggered the end of the game. So Shagrat had lived, Leggy died, all supplies destroyed, both broken, and then my banner points. So that tipped it to a sort of fairly modest victory for me. In fact, the score was... Yeah, the score ended up as 17-10, but I think obviously the banner... I think I did quite a good job protecting the banner, to be honest. Obviously that's like a 4-point swing, to be fair. So it was a very close game, and obviously Shagrat could have easily gone down. Shelob could have easily gone down, and I could have very easily sort of failed a few courage tests where I sort of needed them to go and take objectives and stuff. And I mean, Gorbag failed a test and had to use his will, so that sort of stuff could have happened a bit more, but managed to get away with it. Yeah, so that was it. So I ended up doing fairly well. So final position was 9th. So I was sort of middle of the table in terms of the people who won 3 games. So yeah, quite happy with that. Overall, really, really good games, I think. I think the last game was definitely my favourite, which is probably why I went into more detail about it, to be fair. But it just sticks in the mind a bit more. Not that there's anything wrong with the other games. I think the other games... I think Game 3 was obviously just kind of a bit of... an unlucky one for Chris in terms of matchup. First one I was a bit annoyed at myself with the Eagles, and I kind of didn't play it too well, and dice sort of compounded that. And then Game 2 was a good one too, to be fair, but just the last game, I think there was just so much sort of thinking, and I was sort of winning for the first part of it technically, but then sort of on the back foot, and then there was a few moments where I sort of cleared up all the elves in the middle where we were fighting, and Thorin wasn't doing too much. He lost a few combats, to be fair, but I didn't really wound him, but it kind of didn't really matter. And I had Gorbag Shagrat and then killed Leggy, and Shelob killed Tariel, and that, I think that all happened in sort of 1 or 2 turns, and it just completely changed the game. But it wasn't until the last turn probably that I managed to pull ahead sort of significantly. But yeah, no, it was really fun. It was good. Oh, and a little note about my lists, maybe reflections. It sounds bad, but I don't really have too much to reflect on Eagles because I don't really learn anything. Because the game against Gothmog's Legion, I'm not experienced with Eagles, obviously, because my first game with them was my game 1. But against Gothmog's Legion, I just played it in a way that is logical, and obviously it was, unless I messed something up massively, it was a massive dice issue. I was probably going to win that just because of matchup. And then game 1, I think I sort of learnt a bit about the list, but it was mostly about placement, I think, more than anything, and because I didn't really sort of win enough combats to do lots of bargy shenanigans. Obviously there's sort of something to be said for make sure Guahir was out of 12 of Sauron to avoid the compel, but again, that's just sort of general gameplay rather than sort of list specific, I suppose. But and then with the Cirith Ungol, I sort of know how they play because I've played them last edition. They play in the same way. There's just obviously slightly different rules. And Shagrat's, I suppose the only thing is I don't really know what Shagrat does, because what he did for me against the Riv Knights was he just had a higher fight and he was just sort of bonking Rivendell Knights and sort of combating just combating. So I think he combated a couple of times, so killed, like maybe 4, maybe even 5 in the game. And that's what he was doing, is he was a troop killer, because there was no way I was putting him into anything big, like Elrond, or even, I mean, probably put him into Arwen, but even then, I don't know, it's just, she's a higher fight with and is she a higher fight, or is it the same fight, but she's got an elven blade, and I was a bit like, well, I could end up randomly getting tar pitted by Arwen, who can also wound him fairly easily. Whereas I think in the old edition, when I had heavy armour and a shield, you probably could just throw him into Elrond. Like, as long as you don't get charged by Elrond, you probably chuck him in, and Elrond needs 6s to wound him, so you might just give it a go. But I don't know, he's a bit of a troop killer, I guess. But I always had to hide him at the back until combat, so it kind of meant he was out of contention for a turn most of the time. And then I sort of had to keep him away from big stuff. I suppose in the second game he did go and hunt down Leggy, but that's when I think Leggy was out of might, or sort of on his own and whatnot, and had that animosity and all the rest of it. So I kind of had stuff going in my favour there. And I was so terrified of Thorin, he managed to sort of... I was just pleased he survived against Thorin and then ran away. So I'm not too sure about that. And Gorbag sort of does the same thing as before, to be fair. So he's a bit... I don't know, he's quite fragile. Again, I think without the shield, he's a bit, yeah. So it's, I suppose the roles have changed slightly. I haven't quite figured out what I want to do with Shagrat, but I play Gorbag in the same way as before. And Shelob broadly does the same thing as before as well, but the base means she's a bit quicker in terms of changing direction, which is helpful, but also just a lot more challenging in terms of fitting her in. So she tends to sort of hang around on the flanks, or goes off on her own missions, I think. So, but yeah, that's my take on it. But obviously, I came 9th, so yeah, the tournament overall was really well run. I really liked it. But we did a doubles the day after, and I'm going to do a little debrief on that and sort of wheel my doubles partner out, so we might talk a bit more about it then, I think. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I'll catch you with the next one.